Brahmachari Jai Radha Madhuva Kunya Bhagavati Jai Radha Madhuva Kunya Bhagavati Jana Bhalaba Giri Vadadhati Gopi Nanamalabha Giri Vadadhati Sudanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yasodhanana Rajajana Ranjana Gunatera Panachale Yamunatera Panachale Jaya Rama Guna Dunya Bhakti Raj Madhuva Dunya Bhakti Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravaticacharya also Teta Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Avaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Govardhan Shaima Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Machuranam Ki Jai Jagannath Goswami Ki Jai Munamai Ki Jai Srimati Lasini Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Budle Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shandavani Paschacha Deja Tarni. So we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 12th chapter, text 13. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ayu Shri Kirtir Aishvaryam Achisha Purushasha Ya Bhavanti Eva Hi Tat Kale Yatanichor Vipayaya Ayushri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashishya Purushasya Ya Bhavantyeva Itatkale Yatanichor Vipayaya Ayushri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashishya Purushasya Ja Bhavantyeva Hi Tatkale Yatanichor Vipayaya Ayushri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashishya Purushasya Ya Bhavantyeva Hi Tatkale Yatanichor Vipayaya Ladies? Longevity, Shri opulence, Kirti fame, Aishvaryam power, Achisha benedictions, Purushasya of the living entity, Ya which, Bhavanti arise, Eva indeed, He certainly, Tatkale at that proper time, Yata just as, Anityo one not desiring. Viparya. Reverse conditions. So translation, just as a person not inclined to die must nonetheless give up his longevity, that means long life, opulence, fame, and everything else at the time of death, so at the appointed time of victory, one can gain all these when the Supreme Lord awards them by his mercy. So purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. It is not good to be falsely puffed up, saying that by one's own effort one has become opulent, learned, beautiful, and so on. All such good fortune is achieved through the mercy of the Lord. From another point of view, no one wants to die, and no one wants to be poor or ugly. Therefore, why does the living entity against his will receive such unwanted troubles? It is due to the mercy or chastisement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that one gains or loses everything material. No one is independent. Everyone is dependent on the mercy of the chastisement of the Supreme Lord. There's a common saying in Bengal that the Lord has 10 hands. This means that he has control everywhere, in the 8 directions and up and down. If he wants to take everything away from us with his 10 hands, we cannot protect anything with our 2 hands. Similarly, if he wants to bestow benedictions upon us with his 10 hands, we cannot factually receive them all with our 2 hands. In other words, the benedictions exceed our ambitions. The conclusion is that even though we do not wish to be separated from our possessions, sometimes the Lord forcibly takes them from us, and sometimes he showers such benedictions upon us that we are unable to receive them all. Therefore, either in opulence or in distress, we are not independent. Everything is dependent on the sweet will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So again, the verse, Ayushri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashisha Buddhashashya Bhavancheva Itat Kale Yatana Chor Viparyaya. So Om Gana Tivadandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Un Militam Yena Tasmai Shigurve Namaha. So as I mentioned before yesterday, that we're going to talk about the context and content. Everybody remembers those 2 words? Context means when and how and for what reason is this statement being made and who is making it. That's interesting. So it's interesting in this particular story of the context, we have a demon making this statement. Did you know that? And the demon's name was Vritrasura. Now, Vritrasura is also a great devotee, which is interesting anyway. So how did Vritrasura become a demon, even though he's a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? This story is told in the same canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So here's the story, to give you the context. Once upon a time, there was a great king, and the king's name was Chitraketu. Now, Chitraketu, he wanted to do something that all kings do, because he wanted to have a successor. Successor means his son, in the king's case. Just like Dasarath wanted to have a successor, and his successor, chosen successor, was Lord Ram. So in this particular case, Chitraketu did not have a son. It was a problem. Actually, the same thing in the Ramayana. Dasarath did not have a son, it was a problem. And therefore he had to call for Rishi Shringa to make this Putra Kameshti ceremony. So in this particular case, this Chitraketu, he called for a sage, and that sage's name was Angira Rishi. So Angira Rishi, he saw the king's lamentation, distress, and basically he tried to inform the king, hey, that's not your karma, buddy. You know, sometimes people have karma for something, and sometimes they don't, like Prabhupada is talking about in the purport here. You know, if it's not meant to happen, it's not going to happen. And if it's meant to happen, it'll happen. And it may happen in ways that are inconceivable, or it may happen in ways that just like, wow, it's so wonderful that it happened in this particular way. And I'm going to talk about that in a second in relationship to Srila Prabhupada's own life. So, anyways, getting back to Chitraketu, Chitraketu said to Angira, I gotta have a son. And Angira thought, he needs a good lesson. He's not supposed to have a son, but he thinks he can circumvent the Lord's will. Because Chitraketu obviously knew that he was not supposed to have a son. Why? Because he tried with, it's described in the Bhagavatam, I guess it's a little bit of exaggeration, he tried with 10 million wives. That's roughly 20 times the population of Fiji, or something like that. 18 or 20 times. Imagine being married to that many girls. It's quite problematic, isn't it? It says in Kali Yuga, one is a great hero if they can take care of one wife. What to speak of that many? Of course, sometimes the Bhagavatam deals in what we call hyperboles, exaggerations. In any way, he had many wives. I mean, Krishna can handle that many and unlimited wives, 16,108. But he had many wives, this Chitraketu. And he kept trying and trying. And also he had astrologers who told him, it's not your karma. So, all right, not my karma. You go along with what your karma is, or with what Krishna desires. You're meant to be a great intellectual, fine. If you're meant to be a sweeper of the street, do it for Krishna. Everybody can go back to Godhead. Not that everybody is meant to be a Brahmin. That's why in the ISKCON movement, Prabhupada wanted to institute Varnashram. Because Prabhupada saw, through trial and error, that the majority of devotees really couldn't come up to the standard of being Brahmins. Prabhupada saw that. I mean, this all over the world, not just Fiji. The majority of devotees couldn't be Brahmins, so, Prabhupada gave sannyas, and sannyas ended up as a grahastha. Prabhupada gave a medical initiation, it didn't work. So, therefore, we have to accept what is our guna and karma. Every one of us has to accept. Chitraketu didn't accept. So he kept begging Angira Rishi that, please, I know you're a sage, you can give me a benediction. Of course, the sages, they could certainly give benedictions, but they would not circumvent Krishna's will or Krishna's arrangement of karma. So he said, all right, you can have a son, and his name will be Harsha Shoka. Harsha Shoka means like happiness, distress. Now, of course, everybody's child is Harsha Shoka. It's not all bliss. You raise your child in Krishna consciousness and he turns out to be a demon later on. Or you may raise your child as a demon and he turns out to be a devotee. Right? You can't predict. And every child, they're born, they cry, wake you up in the middle of the night, and drive you crazy. That's definitely distress. And then they smile and give you some happiness. You go, oh, happiness. So everything in the material world is harsha shoka. The body is harsha shoka. Everything you do is harsha shoka. It's mixed, except for Krishna consciousness, is Kevalananda Kanda, which means only bliss. Bhaja Bhaja Bhai Chaitanya Nitai. Isn't it? Kevalananda Kanda. It is only happiness. I mean, that's been my experience. And everything else I've done in life is harsha shoka. Everything else, except for Krishna consciousness. Get ready for it. Don't have any, as we were talking about before, don't have any unrealistic expectations. Otherwise, you'll be disappointed. If you expect every devotee, now from my perspective, I expected every devotee you give initiation to would become a pure devotee, go back to home, back to God in this lifetime. Krishna just said, we're going to give you a wake-up call. Okay, harsha shoka disciples. Isn't it? That's life. You got to be, actually, an interesting riddle. When there's a big flood in a river, which trees survive, the old ones or just the new little sprouts? The old ones don't survive because they snap, whereas the little sprout of the tree, or little whatever you call it, it bends. So it's able to deal with the floods. Sometimes it's flooding, sometimes the river is nice. So, in any case, so let's get back to the story. So Chitraketu was told this, and he became very happy. He said, I'm going to have a son. Okay, so remember, he has many wives. And one of his wives was named Krita Jyoti. And Krita Jyoti was the one who gave birth to that son, because you can't have all 10 million wives give birth to the same son. Of course, in the case of Jarasandha, you had 2 wives give birth to half-sons. You know the story. And so that half-sons were joined together by the witch called Jara and became Jarasandha. So that's a different story. But in this case, it was one lady gave birth, Krita Jyoti. And so naturally, conditioned souls have this tendency called envy, right? I mean, it's not a criticism of women, it's women, men. They're envious. That's our nature. Kama, Krodha, Mada, Matsarya, Bhariya, Vaya. We all have this tendency, built in. We want something that someone else has, whether it's power, prestige, money, a car, whatever it is. We become envious if someone has a lot of money. We have envious if someone has a high position. So the other ladies, they became extremely envious. And that's a problem, because they couldn't have a child. Actually, you see other instances of this in the Vedic literatures. You have King Yayati and Sarmishta and Devyani. Anyway, and this Sarmishta got envious that Devyani had a child, or actually 2 children, and she demanded that the king, even though she wasn't married to the king and she was prohibited from having a relationship with the king, she demanded that she would have a relationship with the king, gave birth to a child, and as a result, the poor king had to lose his masculinity or be subject to old age. So the other ladies killed, Chitraketu's story, killed this little boy. And so everyone in the kingdom was lamenting. Even the ladies who had killed the child lamented, because that was an act, because they were happy he died, because that way Kritajuti wouldn't be the favorite queen. And so Chitraketu started crying, and it was crying like anything. And at that point, our old friend Narada Muni comes. And Narada Muni didn't come in the beginning, because Narada Muni is very much inclined towards renunciation. I mean, there's actually stories in the Bhagavatam how he preached the story of Priyavrata, isn't it? He preached to Priyavrata. Priyavrata didn't want to take up the service of being a king. And so Narada Muni was overridden by Lord Brahma, who came. He said, look, Narada, you may be my son, but I'm your father. So father knows best. And so even though Narada Muni tried to convince Priyavrata to take sannyas, but then Priyavrata was convinced, well, you gotta become a king. So Narada Muni comes to preach to Chitraketu, and Narada Muni is thinking, this guy is in Maya. How to wake him up? So Narada Muni has very unique ways of preaching to people. You know, sometimes, like in the case of Mrigarari, he shows them what his future will be. Mrigarari the hunter. And Mrigarari thinks and sees that, oh, I am going to be attacked and killed by these same animals. I better chant Hare Krishna. You know, if that happened to me, I would chant for sure. So, in this particular case, Narada Muni goes and he brings Chitraketu's son back to life. And Chitraketu's son basically says, you know what, which father are you? And that's sort of a wake-up call, because all of us like to have possession of our children. You know, I'm your father. Who are you? I don't recognize you. I've had so many fathers. And Chitraketu gets the message. Actually, it was a similar thing in the house of Srivas Thakur, who had his son die during the kirtan of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That Srivas Thakur's son died, and he didn't want to disturb Lord Chaitanya. And finally, Lord Chaitanya entered the kirtan, went into the room where the son was, and woke the son up out of death. And the son said, I died during kirtan. Let me go back to Godhead. So Chitraketu got the message, and he decided, well, I guess this married life is not for me. So he started to pray to Lord Vishnu, became a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes we need a little message like that, you know, some wake-up call to make us more serious in Krishna consciousness. Like I myself experienced, like old age is actually a wake-up call. When you're young, you become proud, you know, your strength, beauty, intelligence, everything like that. But when you get older, you realize how limited you are. You can't do a lot of things you'd like to do when you were young. So I realized that. So the wake-up call. And Krishna does that, which I'm going to mention in terms of Prabhupada's purport here in a second. So, anyways, Chitraketu began to worship Lord Vishnu. He saw Lord Vishnu, got a benediction from Lord Vishnu, and then he went on Sankirtan. Because at that time, Sankirtan did not mean a lot of book distribution, because people were more intelligent. You didn't have to distribute books. There was no need of the internet. It's simply, they chanted, and he had this airplane, he traveled with all these ladies, but he wasn't attracted to the ladies. He was using them as a Sankirtan party. Don't you try that. If you men try to travel with a whole bunch of young, attractive girls, you will forget about the Sankirtan after a while. So that is the danger of this material world. So, anyway, so as he was traveling, he, in the air, he happened to see Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva was sitting there with the sages, and Lord Shiva's wife, Parvati, was on his lap. Now, that's a little unusual. Like if you find some married person giving Bhagavatam class and their wife is on their lap, you think this is a little unusual, isn't it? Oh my God, what's happening here? This is Rasa Bas. Actually, the interesting thing is that Vedic sages, when they had to do a sacrifice, their wife had to be by their side. And that's why Lord Ramchandra couldn't do the Rajasuya sacrifice without Sita Devi on his side. That's why he had to get a statue, deity, made of Sita Devi so he could do the sacrifice. Otherwise it would not have worked. The sages said, so it was a dilemma. Lord Ramchandra had a dilemma. So anyway, Lord Shiva was sitting there, and Parvati was there in his lap, and Chitraketu sort of laughed at them. He said, this is highly unusual. And so Lord Shiva didn't think much about it, because he understood that it wasn't like envious criticism that he was giving. He understood that. So therefore, he didn't feel bad. However, Parvati got really upset, and she cursed him. You should become a demon. Remember, he's a pure devotee. So, you should become a demon. So, you don't lose your devotional service even if you become a demon. Swabhamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato layat. There's no loss of diminution, right? So, don't worry if you become a demon in your next life. You can still be a devotee. So what he did, it's described that he was such a powerful devotee, he could have counteracted that curse. But he didn't. He landed his airplane, came down, offered obeisances to Parvati, and said, thank you very much. I'm sorry I committed this offense, and I accept your curse. Very happy to accept your curse. And so Parvati was going, oh my God, this is a real devotee. I shouldn't have cursed him. And then Lord Shiva explains a devotee's position. This is a very wonderful verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The position of a pure devotee. And this is the position we should aspire to also. Narayana parak sarve, na kutasjana viviti, swarga apavarga narakeshu abhitulyartha darshana. And what that says is that topmost devotee of Krishna, pure devotee of Krishna, parak sarve, he doesn't really concern himself whether he is in heaven, swarga, apavarga, which means liberation, getting out of the material world, or narakeshu. Narakeshu means hell. Abhitulyartha darshana. He sees all these places the same. Why? Because he's doing the same thing wherever he goes. Right? Doing the very same thing wherever he goes. Just like Prabhupada gave the example, and this may not relate or be relatable to all of you, but there's a machine called the wheat threshing machine. I'll describe what it does. It takes the wheat that's growing in the field, because you don't grow wheat here in Fiji. It's too warm and humid. And it cuts it. Cuts the wheat, and then later on the wheat is threshed properly, so you get the the actual portion that becomes grain. So it's called a wheat threshing machine. And Prabhupada said, if you take that type of machine and send it to heaven, it doesn't do anything else. It only knows how to thresh. It doesn't know, but it only is functional insofar as threshing wheat. If you send it to hell, it's going to only do that too. I don't know if they have wheat in hell. I don't know if they have wheat in heaven either. I do know they have mangoes in heaven. But, and wherever you put it, it's the same. So a devotee, wherever you put him, he's doing the same thing. Satatam kirtiyanto mam itatascha yadavata namasyantasya bambhakja nitya yukta upasate. He's always worshiping Krishna by glorifying him. Okay? And so in this way, Lord Shiva glorified Chitraketu's standard of devotional service. So then, fast forward, fast forward that Indra committed an offense by killing one of his gurus named Visvarupa. Now the reason he killed this particular guru who gave him power was that Visvarupa also offered oblations to the demons. Don't worry about it. So Indra killed him. So this priest, because Brihaspati had left Indra, so because he was upset with Indra didn't pay him proper respect. So the father of him, of this priest of Indra, his name was Twasta, and he thought, I am going to kill Indra instead. So he performs this sacrifice, and out of this sacrifice, this demon comes. And the demon was previously Chitraketu. So that was the way Chitraketu was born. I mean, the demon was born. Ritrasura. It's a famous story. Ritrasura, the demon. Anyway, so, and also there's some story about how this Twasa chanted the mantra in a different way, so it became, he created a demon who Indra would be the enemy of instead of a demon who would be the enemy of Indra. So it's a whole story. So, this Ritrasura, he was born and he began to attack all the demigods and destroy all the demigods, and basically Indra didn't know what to do because all of his weapons were useless. So, to make a long story short, he had to approach a sage, Dadichi, to get another weapon from the sage's bones. And this sage, I mean, nobody wants to give up his bones, but the sage was willing to, but he tested Indra first. And he actually stated, ultimately the sage stated, that one should be ready to sacrifice everything for the welfare of others. So the sage actually gave up, because the sage had been chanting this mantra in the Rayana Kavacha mantra, and the sage's bones were better than Indra's normal thunderbolts. Okay, fast forward. So Indra attached this demon, who's actually a devotee. At the same time, this demon devotee is actually preaching to Indra. Basically, he's preaching to Indra. And this is what the context of this particular verse. Now, previous to this verse, Indra has actually cut off one of his arms, the demon's arms. And there's one arm remaining. And with this one arm, the demon is actually Ritrasura, demon devotee. I hate to call a devotee a demon, but in this particular case, it's accurate. Ritrasura has knocked Indra's super thunderbolt that he got from the bones of Dadichi to the ground. And Indra's really embarrassed. And this Vritrasura, he tells Indra, pick it up, it's your duty. Do it, I don't mind dying, because I go back to Godhead. It's also a devotee. A devotee is Avaya Sattva Samshuddhi Jnana Yoga Vipassana. He has no fear. Because if death comes, he goes back to Godhead. But if someone is not following Krishna consciousness strictly, not acting as a devotee, then it's like the cat with a rat. Death is like a cat, and you're the rat. So I should say this during initiation, when I'm giving initiation to people, that if you don't chant your rounds, you will experience death like the rat experiences the cat. So if you still want to take initiation, let me know. So anyway, so Chitraketu, or Vritrasura, he wanted to die, and he was preaching to Indra, and this is the context of this particular verse. He said, pick up the weapon, fight, you're supposed to win, you win, and if you're not supposed to win, you're not going to win. Now, in the purport, don't have much time, Prabhupada is actually talking about his own life. You see that Prabhupada is very contextual in terms of his own preaching, his own life, and many of his purports. Because in Prabhupada's own life, Prabhupada strived in a way to carry out his spiritual master's order. Of course, the spiritual master's order was preach in English, preach in the Western world, which Prabhupada received when he was a young man. And when he first met him, his spiritual master in Calcutta, in Uttadanga, Calcutta, he was on the rooftop of the temple there. And Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, said, you are all young men, educated, and your business is to preach. You should preach in English. And then Prabhupada argued a little bit with him, and he was defeated by his spiritual master. And then he meditated on his spiritual master's mission. Even he got that instruction in the final letter from his spiritual master when the spiritual master left this world. He also got an instruction when he was at Radhakund with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Prabhupada was meditating on it completely, 100%. But he was trying through a means that was not going to work. And that means was, he was thinking, let me be successful in business. Let me be a good grahasta, right? And, people can be great preachers as grahastas. That's not my point. Actually, Prabhupada said, the preferable renunciation is the vanaprastha kshetra sannyas, where the husband and wife preach together. There's no need of actual full sannyas in Kali Yuga. In fact, it's prohibited in most cases. So, Srila Prabhupada tried. He had his business. He opened up different chemist stores or whatever in different places, Allahabad, in different places, traveled all over India, striving to accomplish something, to make some money so he could preach in the West. And nothing happened, and Prabhupada went bankrupt. Like Prabhupada was very fond of telling that story, Krishna 10 hands. You can tell it, take away everything. So Krishna gradually took away everything from Prabhupada. His business, his family. His wife was really against his Krishna consciousness. She sold his Bhagavatams for tea biscuits. There's so many stories like that. And everything became a failure. Not really a failure. A devotee never fails. A devotee's success is the endeavor, not the result. The result belongs to Krishna. So Prabhupada never failed. Everything he did was successful because everything he did was with devotion. No other motive. He simply wanted to please his guru and Krishna. That's it. So that's a success. So you should remember that. That's your success in life. not some external thing. If you simply want to please Guru and Krishna, even if nothing works, you're successful. Remember that. So Prabhupada was already successful, and basically, even after he left his business and took sannyas, he tried through so many means, like the Jhansi program. That fell apart. It was taken away from him. His godbrothers interfered with okay, we'll do that in a second. So everything was a failure. And then Krishna pushed him to come to the Western world to preach with nothing, no money, a few rupees he couldn't exchange. And, health condition was really struggling, heart attacks on the boat coming over. And you think, this is a failure. No. He comes, and then Krishna awards him everything. Like Prabhupada, another time he said he had a few children when he was married, and Prabhupada hinted they wouldn't listen to him. And then he preached in the Western world, and Prabhupada showered him with so many children who were willing to die for him. And Prabhupada basically was living in very extreme facilities in Vrindavan. First in the Vamshi Gopal temple, and then a Radha Damodar temple. And then Prabhupada, after a while, he had mansions in so many cities, like 108 cities around the world. And so Krishna was just like showering him, and he couldn't, with his hands, he couldn't keep away all the opulence that, millions of crores of rupees, dollars, sorry, American dollars. Prabhupada had, and Prabhupada would even talk in his lectures about how much money was collected each day by the devotees at Sankirtan. If you listen to some of the early lectures, he would ask Srila Gurudev Tamal Krishna Maharaj, what are the collections every day? And he'd tell him, and Prabhupada did this impressive. He brought his dancing white elephants, Americans, to India to impress people. So Prabhupada, anyway, so that's what happened with Srila Prabhupada. And this is what the purport's about. That if we strive in the right way, and even if we're failures, we're successful, that's another point. But then if we actually get in tune with Krishna's desire, then we can do amazing things. Like Prabhupada said, impossible is a word, by Krishna's mercy, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. Prabhupada said that. I was there when Prabhupada asked us to produce 17 books in 2 months. It's impossible. In those days, there were no computers, or it was very, very primitive type of typesetters, not computers. In those days, there was no internet, there was no AI, where you could ask artificial intelligence to make a picture of Krishna for you, and they make beautiful pictures of Krishna. I don't know if you ever work with artificial intelligence. I do. You could ask it to make a movie of the Ramayana, and it makes a better movie than anyone's you've seen. I've seen it. It's just the characters, the demons, are actually much more impressive. So in those days there was nothing. And devotees had to hand paste all the words on the pages. And there had to be a big camera shooting it, and you had to take the negatives and opaque the negatives. I'm not going to get into what that means. I did it. And it happened. Miracle. The printers couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. Because it happened. And it actually happened. So if we actually act in coordination with Krishna's desire, any one of you can perform miracles. That's really the point. Because Krishna will just shower you with unlimited opulence. If he wants. And of course, it doesn't want, you just chant Hare Krishna and your life is successful anyway, you're happy. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. That's the source of bliss anyway. chanting the holy name, isn't it? Nama Chintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. Purnashura Nityamukto. Vinatvam Nama Nama Nama. You're with Krishna. Look at the deities. There's Krishna. You can say, I've already seen Krishna. See Krishna. Of course, Krishna's a little late this morning. But I can't do anything about that. I'm not in control. Don't blame Krishna. That's his free will. So anyway, see, there's some of the points about the context and the content of this verse and purport. Any questions or comments? Seems like we have time. They haven't come out to greet the deities. Questions, comments, arguments, problems? Oh my God, everyone's so quiet. Yes, sir.
On the wake up call, is this the part of our karma or will or with the lack of utsaha we have?
Yeah, there's several things. It's not karma. We don't have karma. We're chanting Hare Krishna. We may have token reaction, as I mentioned the other day. But it's also our lack of faith, determination, lack of faith in the order of the Guru. One should have Yasha Devi Parabhakti. If one has implicit faith in the order of the spiritual master and the Vedic literatures, everything is revealed to that person. Yasha Devi Parabhakti Yata Devi Tata Guru Tashaite Patakatita Yarta Prakashante Mahatmana. Okay, so Krishna says we have to end. Okay, there's Krishna's representative. Yeah, he's representing Krishna. He's like our guru. So all glories